Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. My name is Adi and today we're going to go over the top 11 teams or team archetypes entering the Series 11 metagame. There will be rental codes for every single one of them, and at the end of the video I'll go over some of the under the radar restricteds that I also think have potential. Hopefully this will be a good review for anyone who needs to brush up on the state of the Series 8 metagame when it ended and can give you a starting point on where to start building from entering Series 11. I think Series 8 was one that had a really fascinating developmental process where people were continuously developing and innovating upon and optimizing the existing builds of common teams. And so I'll be talking about these teams through that lens, giving you an idea of how these teams evolved over time and maybe where they can go from here. Also, not only will every team have a rental code on screen, but I will also link in the description a PokePaste or a team report if I can find one. So if you are interested in a specific team, make sure to check the description because there is no better way to learn how to use a team than listening to the builder or reading about the builder talk about how they use the team itself. So make sure to hit that like button, subscribe, and let's jump into it. The first team that I want to talk about is Lapras Zacian, better known as Lapdog. This is a team that dominated the start of the format. At the first major tournament, the X9 Championship, it represented 8 of the top 16 slots, including 3 of the top 4. 2 of those top 16 were Alex Underhill and Justin Burns, whose team is currently highlighted and who talk through their thought process in team building on this channel. The archetype works primarily because of Zacian's incredible defensive typing. Combined with screens, intimidate, and investment in bulk, it's almost impossible to power through without Dynamax, of course, which Behemoth Blade can punish immensely. Lapras also has synergy because it threatens Incineroar and Landorus, 2 Pokemon that Zacian really doesn't like facing down. Overall, the slow and grindy Zacian Fire Water Grass type of team that is oh so common in Series 10 had their origins here. However, over time, other archetypes managed to find ways to deal with this overly conservative style of play, and as such, Lapdog teams needed a more aggressive mode. 2 of these modes were Thunderous Zacian and Dragapult Zacian, which rose to prominence sequentially. Torviv won the first Victory Road Circuit qualifier with the Thunderous version, and 2 weeks later I would finish top 4 in the VGC circuit with a Dragapult Zacian team, both of which had the option to max either the powerful offensive Pokemon or max the Lapras and play much more defensively. Over time, however, the Lapras fell off these teams for other defensive options that beat much more specific threats. The Lapdog comp didn't really see any success after this until the very end of the format, where Cantfly finished first place in the qualifier for Japan Nationals, with a much more offensive version of Lapdog. Now, granted, this was a best-of-1 ladder tournament, but I think that if Lapdog is going to continue to see play entering Series 11, Cantfly's team is going to be the starting point. Lapdog, however, did not win the first tournament of the format. Instead, it was won by Genius's Torn Ogre team. His team was very reminiscent of the Torn Ogre teams from Sun and Moon series in 2019, which meant that his team was much more refined than a lot of the other teams in the tournament. His exact 6 were commonplace for the next month or two, but slowly fell off partially because it had very few answers to Dragapult. People did figure out other ways to build Kyogre, and one of the first real innovators in that regard were Taron and Owie, who built a slower, more defensive Kyogre team that utilized an offensive mode with Dragapult and Regieleki, and defensive options like Porygon 2 and Ferrothorn. This team won a Desafio Latam tournament and the Battle Train in the same weekend, and really picked up in popularity. After that, most notably, Matty Moo got top 6 in the European Players' Cup with this team. Now, Torn Ogre did actually win Players' Cup, but I'll talk about that later because it is a very unorthodox build. However, the last gasp of traditional Torn Ogre styles of teams was, I think, Master Mark's team, which got top 16 in the North American Players' Cup. Kyogre was really hit hard by the rise of Venusaur, which was everywhere by the end of the format, and Mark's team had a lot of answers to that. Despite that, both his losses in Players' Cup were to Venusaur teams. That being said, Kyogre did see some success in the Japan Nationals qualifier, where Lonfop finished in 3rd place with his weakness policy Kyogre team. This may be one of the few ways that Kyogre has found to adequately respond to the rise of Venusaur. It can take that G-Max Fine Lash and hit back with a +2 Max Blizzard. And this team is the sort of out-of-the-box style of thinking that you really need to succeed with Kyogre in a Venusaur-dominated metagame. Another team that saw a lot of play at the start of the format was Dialga. I remember prepping for the X9 Championship and seeing so much Dialga at the top of the ladder, and 4 of them ended up top cutting, including Colin Hire, whose team is on screen right now. Dialga plays very similar to Metagross in Series 7. It can use max Steel Spikes and max Quakes to boost either defense and make it very hard to KO without proccing its weakness policy. It also has a base 150 special attack stat, meaning it hits like a truck. However, this is another Pokemon that really fell off with the rise of residual damage dealers like Venusaur, Charizard, and Coalossal. Not only do these Pokemon hit very hard, but the Gmax Vinelash type effects completely ignore the defense boost that Dialga worked so hard to accumulate, and as such, Dialga fell off in usage as these started to rise in usage. However, there was one notable Dialga team that Taka Na-Yu used to qualify for Japan Nationals, featuring a Turtonator. Turtonator absolutely bodies Most Zacian and Urshifu with Iron Defense Body Press, and the rest of the team is teched out to beat Sun. Blizzard Dialga and Weatherball Landorus were two really interesting techs that gives Dialga a fighting chance against this type of team, and so I wouldn't be surprised to see more of this Pokemon as we begin Series 11. The other restricted that feels like Metagross is the one that shares its typing, Solgaleo. This really wasn't on anyone's radar until Pado got top 8 at the X9 Championship with it, and he got that far because this team absolutely farms Lapdog. Most builds had so few options to beat it. Much like Dialga, it can either boost its defense or special defense while Dynamaxed, but unlike Dialga, it cannot get stat dropped because of full metal body. This means that you aren't affected by either Intimidate or Parting Shot, but it also means that if your partner bulldozes, you don't lose speed, but everything else on the field does. Next to the super speedy Spectrier, this team was able to out-damage and out-bulk a number of teams in the early metagame. However, this team does not have a Kyogre matchup. Both Wide Guard and Wild Charge on Solgaleo don't nearly do enough to solve the matchup, and so you need your partners to put in a lot of work. That's what Alexandra managed to do with her top 16 Hatteran series team. She went undefeated in Swiss in games before getting upset, largely because she teched really hard to beat Kyogre, and the rest of the core was far more powerful than most of the metagame. However, after this point, Calyrex Shadow started to rise in usage as well, and you really don't have the slots on this team to cover both Kyogre and Calyrex effectively. This team still has some fantastic matchups. It does so well into Calyrex Ice and so well into Zacian, but it struggles just enough with those two common teams that has remained at the fringe of meta, although Pado did give it one last ride to finish top 8 in the Victory Road Circuit finale. There was one other restricted that was really hyped up as a metagame destroyer that never fully realized its potential, and that is Palkia. Palkia regularly cut tournaments throughout the format, and the team you see on screen is maybe its one big result, winning the Sharon Cup in Japan. Its typing makes it a naturally good choice against Kyogre, and if Zacian isn't running Play Rough, it's also really good into that too. Dragon coverage is really strong neutral coverage into most defensive cores, and as a Dynamax target, it can set up Rain or disrupt opposing teams with Fire, Ice, or Ground coverage moves. However, Amoonguss is a big problem for it, and once it's whittled down, it can't do very much in front of a Rillaboom. Going into Players' Cup 3, I remember a lot of people hyping this up as one of the best anti-meta restricteds, and it certainly saw a high usage in that tournament. However, it did not convert. Despite high usage, the best result it attained was Red Silver finishing top 8 in Europe with his Palkia team. Palkia certainly has the traits of a very powerful anti-meta Pokemon, but if you're using this, you have to stay one step ahead of the metagame and choose its partners very carefully. We're on to the biggest meta threats now, and Calyrex Shadow is certainly one of them. This is by far the strongest hyper-offensive restricted. As 1 and Astral Barrage let it snowball through teams if it just takes 1 KO. It can Dynamax and abuse Phantasm to help physical partners do more damage, or let something else Dynamax and then pick off the weakened Pokemon afterwards. Surprisingly, this Pokemon was nowhere to be seen for the first month of the metagame. It finally converted when Manuel Barea won the second Victory Road Qualifier, at which point it was here to stay. I think this team is uniquely positioned in a Vinelash-dominated metagame because it doesn't care about taking chip damage. Calyrex doesn't care if it's at 20% or 80% HP, it wants to outspeed you and take KOs regardless. Come Players' Cup 3, this team really overperformed, with a Regigigas variant finishing in 4th place and the Glastrier Indeedee variant finishing in 5th place. Quite frankly, this Pokemon is here to stay. The other Calyrex is another pervasive meta threat. Calyrex Ice also took a while to find its footing in the metagame, but the baseline build was established by Kaoru, finishing 2nd place in the second Victory Road Qualifier. This team plays as a hard Trick Room team, but traditionally it struggles immensely with Incineroar, since Intimidate can slow you down so much, and you need a lot of counterplay against Incineroar to make it viable. Kauro ran Haze Dusclops to get around that, letting you fire off full power Glacial Lantis even when Incineroar switches in, and taking full advantage of those Trick Room turns. Haru took it one step further, running Thundurus as another Incineroar counter en route to a top 4 finish at a Taiwan regional. Calyrex Ice also saw some success in the regional stages of Players' Cup, but the only player to make global finals with it was Alec Rubin, who put Venusaur Torkoal on the team, as well as a Mimikyu to proc his weakness policy and reliably set up Trick Room. Alec released a team report on this channel, so if you want to hear more about this team and how he built it, check out the description. Finally, if you prefer not to use Venucool on every team, Kuro Hanalo finished 7th place at Japan Nationals qualification with a more standard Mimikyu Calyrex version of the team. Like I mentioned earlier, this format is dominated by residual damage, and one of the most notable abusers of that is Coalossal. Cole was a metagame warping threat in Series 7 and 9, but it took a while to find its place in this metagame. Its first big result was Mike D'Angelo finishing in 2nd place in the 3rd Victory Road Circuit Qualifier. Coalossal always had the ability to power through unprepared teams, but even if it went down earlier in the game, the residual damage it created was powerful enough that Urshifu and Zacian could find ways to clean up games. The team also benefited from the Dragapult Zacian combination that was rising to prominence at the time. Mike's team could easily max the Dragapult and had a Moongus to support that mode. However, the team grew more refined from there, and the standard version looked like the team that Orlando used to finish 12th in Players' Cup Finals, having the option to play with a more standard Zacian Firewater Grass mode, or abuse Coalossal with a support Dragapult or Urshifu, and your choice of cleanup Pokemon. The team plays very reactively, very defensively, but the threat of Coalossal exerts constant pressure and often forces a premature Dynamax from opponents. Coalossal did very well in the regional stages of Players' Cup 3, with 4 of those players qualifying to the global stage, including Mike, Agati with the Salamence Coalossal team, and Joe UX9 with his Eviltal Coalossal team. However, come global finals, I think people were a little more prepared for Coalossal, and it didn't finish better than top 8. The moral of the story is, if you want to do well, know your Coalossal matchup. The other archetype that really abuses residual damage is Groudon. Groudon itself is a powerful restricted, but it doesn't match up that well into things like Kyogre, Eviltal, and both Calyrex forms. Its main utility is enabling powerful Gmax Pokemon like Venusaur and Charizard, and then cleaning up games afterwards. The first big result for Groudon was Miss Salami winning the Hatterene series with it. She is also, I believe, the first person to use Umbreon on this sort of team. Come the end of the format, there were 2 main classifications of Groudon teams, broadly called American Sun and European Sun. European Sun fully abused Umbreon. Snarl and Yawn stopped opposing attackers from committing to the field, while Moonlight got boosted by the sun. This damage reduction, along with screens from Grimmsnarl, allowed your Groudon and other Sun abusers to set up residual damage, which is so powerful in these longer games that focus on trading damage. 3 of the 4 European qualifiers from Players' Cup 3 used these exact 6 Pokemon, of which Leonardo Bononomi got the furthest, finishing in 2nd place. He has a great team report on the team, which is linked in the description. However, his rental code is down, so what you're looking at is the team that PokeRaf used to qualify for global finals. On the other hand, there is American Sun, which uses Porygon 2 and Incineroar in place of Umbreon. It also abuses Weakness Policy Venusaur, which is a punish to teams that try to max Airstream it, and it can always live that attack with screens. This finds its origins in the team that Simel used to win the RVGC circuit. I remember playing Simel in this tournament and being blown away. I could not find a way to gain an edge on this team, so naturally, I stole it. Colin, Raghav, and I all used an optimized version of this team in Players' Cup 3, and Colin and I finished in 5th and 6th place, each 1 win away from global finals. Our team has an extensive team report on my channel. It goes into depth on this team, and then Colin also talks about it more on his channel. Later, Yoav Reuven would use the team to finish in 3rd place in Players' Cup, and North would finish in top 4 of the Victory Road Circuit finale with it. Groudon is maybe the most optimized archetype in this metagame, and I think these are 2 of the best teams in the entire format, so you're going to see a lot of them. Zacian is the restricted with the most diverse supporting cast in this format. Because it cannot Dynamax, you can put so many other powerful Dynamax Pokemon next to it. We saw Lapras and Coalossal earlier in the video, but here's a sampling of other Zacian teams that did well later in the format. Much like Zacian took advantage of Coalossal's residual damage, you can also use it to take advantage of Charizard and Venusaur's residual damage. The highlighted team is what Kevin Salvetto used to win the Victory Road Circuit finale, and he actually faced a 6 Pokemon mirror in the finals. Just like Groudon teams, the combination of Screens, Intimidate, and Yawn punishes offensive play really heavily, while the residual damage is really powerful against defensive teams. The only difference is that instead of a Groudon cleaning up games, it's a Zacian on this team. Agati had a similar concept on his top 6 Players' Cup Finals team, using a Charizard as the primary Dynamax and supporting it with 2 ground types in Landorus and Garchomp, each of which could also Dynamax into some worse matchups. If you didn't want to use a Gmax Pokemon, there are other options as well, as both UB Slow and PeroKichi did well in Japan National qualifiers, with Zacian teams focused more on Rotom and Landorus, with specific defensive choices to pressure Venusaur, Charizard, and Coalossal. Finally, we have the team that actually won Players' Cup. I think this team has maybe the most interesting developmental process in all of Series 8. Who would have thought using Torkoal and Kyogre on the same team is a good idea? The team first saw success when Springs, a Korean player, won a ladder tournament with it, but the best of one nature of the ladder made it easy to write off the results. A little later, Yanagi would win the 3rd Victory Road Circuit qualifier with it, and that version was much more refined, but it also came out of nowhere. No one knew what it was trying to do, but soon it was on everyone's radar. This version also did pretty well in Oceania's Players' Cup, with the highest finisher being Sam Pandelis, who finished in top 6. However, NJ11 took this version of the team and continued to build upon it. He and John Evans would take this more refined version to Players' Cup, and while NJ finished in top 16 in North America, John would go on to win the entire tournament. The core synergy here is that Kyogre enables Venusaur in ways that other Pokemon like Torkoal and Groudon don't. Not only does it give it the ability to take fire attacks, but it also gives it a water-type Weather Ball, allowing it to KO Incineroar. Of course, Kyogre can also clean up games once teams are chipped down really well, as can Torkoal, provided you don't have them on the field at the same time. This team takes advantage of the strengths of the Venucoal and Torn Ogre cores and mashes them together in a way that finds immense synergy. That being said, it's a very difficult team to pilot. It heavily rewards precise play, but you need to know your game plans going into team preview, because if you misposition, the anti-synergies can and will punish you. John came on this channel and gave an extensive guide on how to use the team after winning Players' Cup, and I recommend you check it out if you are interested in using this team. Finally, we have some restricteds that I would be remiss if we didn't talk about, but never quite saw top results. Kyurem White was on the fringes of the metagame. It theoretically has a fantastic matchup into Groudon and Kyogre, with those Pokemon having very few ways to damage it and really disliking Ice-type attacks. Vichy was one of the best pilots of this team, and for Players' Cup 4 qualifiers, he made one big change to his version of the team, which is that he added an Absol to try to crit through screens from Grimmsnarl, and ended up piloting it to a first place finish in North America. Duskmane was another restricted that saw regular play, but never quite converted. It had an amazing stat line and ability, but has a real problem with Intimidate spam, and so you had to build your team specifically to beat Incineroar. Yoko was one of the people to find success with it, finishing top 4 in the Hatterene series by using Pokemon like Lapras and Tyranitar that can threaten Incineroar and Charizard, as well as Swords Dance Necrozma to offset Intimidate. Yveltal is another fan favorite that occasionally saw success. The combination of Snarl and Oblivion Wing lets it slow down games and trade damage effectively. One example of a successful Yveltal team was what Max used to win the Taiwan Regional. Yveltal gave him the time to set up either Tapu Fini or Registeel endgames, and he also used an Arcanine instead of an Incineroar because it gave him an additional Fairy Resist. Finally, one of my favorite legendaries is Reshiram. This Pokemon occasionally cut tournaments, but I think it has a lot of potential. Fire Dragon is excellent typings against Zacian and Sun teams, and Groudon gets outsped and hit with a Max Flare. The big weakness, however, is ground moves, and FKC found a way to deal with that with the 3 ground resists and immunities on his team, as well as a Milotic to hit those ground types. They ended up in 75th place to qualify for Japan Nationals. Finally, I want to highlight 2 off-the-wall Zacian teams that also saw success. The first is what Sai Chen used to finish in 2nd place at the Taiwan Regionals, featuring a Drampa. Drampa provided a ton of utility since Cloud 9 turns off all weather, while its normal typing and Snarl made it really strong into Calyrex Shadow. They also used Imprisoned Zacian to stop other Zacian, an annoying tech choice that takes advantage of the fact that most Zacian aren't running that much speed. The last team is John Hu's Zacian team, featuring Aerodactyl and Bisharp, that finished in top 4 of the 5th Victory Road Circuit qualifier. I think it primarily takes advantage of the Dragapult Zacian combination, but Bisharp is also used as a valuable Incineroar deterrent that pressures Calyrex Shadow, and Aerodactyl, I don't really know why Aerodactyl is on the team. Regardless, he found a lot of success with it, so it might be worth trying out. I hope this video helps you jump right into Series 11 without missing a beat. If you're interested in more Series 11 content, I have a playlist of the 8 team reports I recorded in Series 8, where I spoke to some phenomenal players about the teams they piloted to very impressive results. You should be able to find it right around here somewhere. And of course, I will continue to make such team reports as Series 11 progresses, so make sure to subscribe. And let me know what you think in the comments, and until next time, I will see you all later.